KrakCast News, everybody. Welcome back. Lots of stuff to talk about this week. I'm here with Josh, Dr. Mike, and Dave. After a week, I had a last week off, kind of for reasons that I'm waiting for the sarcastic. Who wants to go first? Go ahead.
Oh, we'll be peppering
Get
the whole,
it out of the way.
The whole
Timing.
issue. Yeah.
What exactly happened?
I
again?
showed up 2 hours early. I don't know why. I just had 5:30 in my mind. I showed up 2 hours early.
We have
Did
never
not feel like waiting around. So
never recorded a podcast at 5:30.
I don't know. I just
Ever.
On Friday.
He was stuck on military time, like as a good American.
5:30.
We meet on
17:30
Friday.
confused with
It's
7:30.
always 7:30.
So I just went home. So sorry about that. So
Yeah, you really left me in. I was ill prepared to host, John. I was very tired that day.
Yeah, I just
And emotional.
You're professional though, Dave. You made it somehow. You pushed through and you made it.
Herbal tea kicked in.
Let's start with some local news here, guys. Big surprise for the eighth time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, eighth time. A formal official announcement that the endless renovation project on Krakowska Street has been pushed back. Now, the latest Fantasyland date for completion is the end of August. They say that's when we can expect to get on a tram. Do you believe it?
They've had as many.
When is this going to be done?
They've had as many deadlines as they found new gates. It's absolutely ridiculous. Omni shambles that is outside the door of the studio we record in. We've had a bird's eye front row seat to this disaster. Josh, sum up the chaos you've been living in for the last few months.
Well, I mean, it's got particularly acute in the last month or so because there is no pavement outside the building, which means
a mess.
Yes, you heard that right.
So which means that everyone who visits Krakowska Towers brings with them a small quantity of sand, which remains there in the foyer.
There's almost no place for the limousines to park out front.
The concierge is, constantly polishing his
Ridiculous.
shoes. Yeah.
I mean,
But although the
19-foot ceilings right now, we're up to only 18 because of all the sand buildup.
And although what's interesting, of course, like Krakowska itself is largely surfaced from beginning to end, which means that it's a kind of massive car park. At the moment.
Quick recap. When they started this whole mess, 2.5 years ago, Dr. Mike, the first supposed completion date was when? Do you remember?
Beginning of November, that's when they announced.
November
2019, yeah.
Okay. Then they started discovering various archaeological things, like one side of a bridge, and then, surprise, the other side of a bridge. Then they decided that some of the concrete was not poured correctly, had to redo that. I'm not sure what the excuse for the eighth delay is. But yeah, Josh, like you said, when I think you said it, when you look at it, just as a layman, as a non-construction guy, it looks basically done. The details may be left to be completed, but the heavy work seems to be done and ready to go.
I'd say the details be fairly important in the tram system. I was down in Park Giordano today, as I believe I've mentioned already.
And the other show we just recorded.
Oh yeah, that'd be confusing.
That'll be releasing later.
Hashtag whatevs.
Time traveler's wife.
When I was getting off the tram, they were hoisting into place the roof of a new tram stop. And it was just really interesting to watch them lowering it into shape.
It is interesting to watch, and I mean, some of what they've been doing on the sort of lower part of Krakowska in the last week or two has been putting up the overhead cables for the pantographs for the trams, and that's kind of interesting. And they're putting in these nice, kind of elegant, slightly sort of faux Victorian street lamps, which will have energy-saving, light-emitting diodes instead of old-fashioned bulbs.
All right, guys, put your money where your mouth is. Will we be riding trams on Krakowska before the end of August?
No.
I think there's a chance that when the students come back in October, they will be. But a chance. I wouldn't put money on it, but definitely not the end of August.
So we could flirt with 2021 on this thing.
Yeah, although we will say, grudgingly, because it's significantly impacted all of our lives, that we've had the kind of, what would you say, not bird's eye, but when you can see the layers of something, like a kind of side-on view, cross-section view of what they're putting in.
Or geologists.
And they're putting in these enormous slabs of reinforced concrete underneath the tram lines, which in theory, I guess, will eliminate the constant maintenance that the tram lines need in Krakow. Like,
it's going to be at least 2 years.
I know there's always going to be some give and take in a railway line, but it seems ridiculous how often they're out with the welding torches in most corners of the city.
Well, anyway, that's what they say. The end of August, the trams are back. The road will be open. We will see. Good chance we'll be talking about the 9th official delay of the Krakowska project.
Especially in a week when there's not much else to talk about. Sure. So, yeah.
I should have just went ahead and done the underground, John. It would have been as...
Goddamn underground.
Oh, I think they won't build an underground. They'll just lift the entire city, put it on stilts.
What?
That's actually an interesting idea.
Yeah, that'd take us in a slightly surreal
Probably
direction.
cheaper than digging the underground. Anyway, moving on. Staying
I was
local
thrashing
here.
this one out in the pub.
Staying local, just the other side of the river from where we are right now, the old Hotel Forum. Ever since it lost steam and finally died in 2003, 2004, something like that?
2002, it stopped being a hotel, which is hilarious because it was officially opened in 1989. So it only functioned as what it was supposed to be for about 13 years.
And had 14 guests.
And it took like 12 years to build it, I think. So
They started in the 70s. Yeah, it took forever.
So anyway,
If ever there's a sign that everybody was drunk by the end of communism,
ever since
it's
it
that
died,
building.
the city has been trying to figure out what to do with it, using it as a way to draw people down to the waterfront by the river. A few years ago, they hit on what seems to be a fairly successful formula, kind of a mixture of entertainment. They had the man-made beach. They had a floating barge.
Please.
They had the volleyball. They had the restaurants and bars.
Don't you dare describe that development as anyway a success, even from
Well, I
day
mean, it
one.
was part of the evolution. They've eventually found a winning combination.
It set it back years. It was such a disaster.
But is it still kind of family-friendly now? Or is there anything for kids over there now?
Is the
Yeah, there
vibe?
isn't a balloon anymore.
Can you give us more details about what's going in there? I was reading this article.
I'm getting to that. It's called an introduction day. I'm getting to that.
Okay, well, I'll give the quick history then. This is a very an area of Krakow that has got massive potential. I think there could be we've always felt that could be a beautiful spot along the river, and finally they're looking to do with Hotel Forum. What they always should have done with it is, if they're not going to tear it down, do something useful with it, repurpose it somehow. I mean, there's all these great developments across Europe where you take old spaces and repurpose them, you know.
They tear it down.
Well,
Because
if
the
you're not
city
gonna
has designated it as a protected site.
Yeah, so
Conservatorio.
in that sense, if you're going to do that, you know, give it a good scrub, you know, and modernise it, and go put new fixtures into
Problem
it.
is, they can't. Gutting it is too expensive. It would be cheaper to actually tear it down and build something new. There's asbestos in it as well. The fact that all the rooms are too small and they're built of concrete.
I get what you're saying. I know all the problems with it. You know, it's a long-standing eyesore, a mental sore of mine.
Horrible.
But here's my thing, right? It's a big project, but it's an absolute eyesore. I really think something needs to be done with it. And if we could, I've actually come around to the way of thinking, if we go full hipster on it and just set like an army, a colony of hipsters loose on the place, like, I mean, thousands of them, and they just you know, like graffiti and barber shops and all that kind of
Beard grooming.
Berliner style, isn't crap architecture awesome type of thing.
Lumberjack shorts.
Bring it all back, juice bars, everything. Just thousands of hipsters making our lives better with their quirky businesses. That's what we should do with it.
Okay, but the point of the story and the reason why we're talking about it, because apparently there's some new ideas.
doing that.
There's new ideas for the mix of attractions, let's say, that'll be featured there. Guys, we're supposed to kind of expand into the indoor section of the building
Craft jam shops, you know.
That's what they're doing. They're introducing a company or kind of an incentive called Hala Forum has decided to like introduce 10 restaurants there. There's a lot of like suggestions that these will be restaurants that are not, don't like win right now, but nothing confirmed. And you know, you walk into one place, it's 2,000 square meters, so it's huge, and you'll be able to order from any one of those restaurants while sitting there. You'll have a view of the Wisła, of the castle. This is actually probably the part.
Better still, you won't be able to see the forum because you'll be inside it.
And this will be a part of the building. Like, if has anybody been there for concerts, then you know that there was several large rooms in there, event rooms, and those will be the ones that will be turned into now these restaurants and these bars. And there will also be an event space available there for like gigs, parties, and things like that. I'm saying like a lot.
When you look
lately,
at Dalton Wilnich, you know, I mean, what you can do with a space that's literally falling apart, how cool it can be with a little bit of thoughtful.
That's part of the cachet,
design,
isn't
you know.
it? It's part
There was
of the appeal.
asbestos there as well. I say, get at it, the hipsters.
But Dave, you're right when you say that the forum space has huge potential. I
I mean, that's a compliment to
on the
hipsters,
one hand,
by
when
the
you
way,
look
'cause
at
I
it on the
love their
map,
businesses.
the view is great. It's by the river, but at the same time, it's also an idiotic location. And you know, for pedestrians, it's a stupid location. The walking distance from the center of town, it's not going to draw too many tourists. You know, you can see it, but it's hard to get to. That's why it's an idiot location for a hotel as well. And so I think it's kind of mixed. Plus, as long as the city's involved as a landlord, as an organizer, as a stakeholder, you know, just by definition, in my book, nothing's going to get, you know, it's going to be messed up no matter what.
I just think that plot of land is cursed. I mean, look at the balloon, like, you know, I mean, the chaotic struggle to get that thing
I
in
got
the
to
air.
ask because I never see it, but is the Luna Park stuff still there? The rides?
it is. I mean, it was only supposed to be there for a few weeks, but because of coronavirus, they couldn't move it around. It's still there.
And it's not just that the Hotel Forum is ugly, it's kind of car park structure and ring roads snake out in a horrible way as well from the building. Like, you know, there's an awful lot of space there. I think that's one of the problems. It's such a big building.
Dr. Mike, I'll ask you because I'm too old and boring to know. What's the cool factor of the Hotel Forum space? And, you know, is this the...
Mike is our authority.
Yeah,
cool.
this is how pathetic we are around here.
I was there in Unsound last year.
How cool compared to the other locations in town is the Hotel Forum space for a night out and drinks and things like that?
You only have Forum System right now there when it comes for drinks. It's popular, especially in the summer, because it's something where you can step outside and drink and be loud and not worry about anything. They usually get the hits like DJs. You had like the 89 Club there, which is 89 as in the year the building was officially opened. It's quite popular. You've got that torn down concrete look. Kind of socialist 80s, but still modern in the same time. It's still quite popular.
Could it replace Dolnik Młynów, which
if Dolnik Młynów shuts down,
it is.
You get enough places opening up there. Then just the fact that you go there knowing that if this bar is full, then you have this other bar next to it. You have a few places around to choose from. Then it might become its own little center. For recreational drinking.
So Kazimierz lost its cool factor. Podgorze lost its cool factor. Dolnik Młynów was being shut down. The hipsters need a place to go. Is that what you're saying, basically?
It's very likely. I mean, hipsters already go there, but if they close Dolnik Młynów, then this is the most likely place where they could go for new places to party.
They should be encouraged and given tax breaks and given, that's what this place is. It's a big, empty building. If you give people a good setup to make some money, they will put money into the building. And
for Christ's sake, there are trees growing out of that building.
It doesn't take, Mark, much. You strip it back to the concrete, you polish the concrete, you put in some bars, you put in some toilets, you put in some lighting.
You're right, Dr. Mike. I think there are places where nature is reclaiming the building, essentially.
I mean, there's some scary grass works going on.
And how is a place, Dr. Mike?
There might be some trees in the rooms.
It's protected by the conservator. How is a hotel, an ugly as hell hotel, that was open for 13 years, how was this part of the protected part of Krakow's history?
Because it's an example of socialist brutalism architecture.
Like we were talking about Cracovia a few weeks ago.
There's an idea in civics, in city architecture, that all your history is equally kind of valid, and to kind of erase any part of it is somehow a crime against architectural history.
Whatever.
I believe that's nonsense myself. We covered in one of our early episodes about brutalism, Josh, remember?
Yeah, although you kind of wonder why there hasn't been
classic, by the way. Go back and check it out, listeners.
There isn't some kind of populist movement to kind of like tear down, any building which is representative of the decades of communist oppression. Sorry, I'm reading from the wrong hymn sheet, I guess.
Let's move on, still keeping it local here. Guys, there's an interesting kind of unreported scandal issue going on here. It requires a little bit of background explanation. Dave and Dr. Mike can help us out on this. It has to do with the city slowly and quietly waking up to the fact that they have kind of de facto given away a lot of really valuable land. Who wants to take the lead on kind of introducing
for technical details? It's always Mike. Go ahead, Mike. I'll just.
Well, in Poland, the state can own plots of land, in a kind of understanding that you don't really get in common law Anglo-Saxon countries, and in stuff that was nationalized decades ago, for instance. And there's certain time you might have noticed, like old buildings or things that are run down. The state usually owns that, but what happens is in Poland you also have squatters' rights. So if you live somewhere, if you build a building there, if you farm that area for enough time, and the owner, being either a private owner or in this case the state, doesn't intervene and try to get you off that land, then you eventually build up rights for it. And unfortunately, the city has not protected its rights when it comes to plots of land all over town, to the point of apartment buildings being built, and after 20 years, the city is saying wait, no, this is ours. It's too late. We've gotten right.
How oblivious do you have to be when you don't notice that people are building massive apartment buildings on your land?
Apparently,
as many as 224 plots, I think, since 2012, Łukasz Gibała has uncovered. By the way, I'm going to flat out call him out. By the way, the boy Gibała told our friend John here that he'd come on the KrakCast.
He did during the election.
He looked in his eyes and said he would come on and do an interview with us, and he absolutely refused when he really realised what political dynamite we dole out every week.
Before you say anything bad about him, let's make this our last chance. I think I've still got his number somewhere. I'll give him a call.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll come and join us.
Have a reach around your underpants, see if you can find something dangling down there, and come on and give us an interview.
Well, so much for that.
Now, Dave, when you say 224 plots of land, these are not tiny little, little patches of grass. These are substantial pieces of property, yeah? In many cases.
Imagine 20 full-size soccer fields, John.
Dr. Mike, so somebody from the city finally notices that there's a building on their land. They go there, and you're saying it's just the not case law, but it's just like the law doesn't know what to do with them. So kind of by default, the people get to stay there.
Well, the argument is that if you have been on some property and say paid the fees for that, developed it, paid the taxes, looked after it if there was already a building there, maintained it, and the true owners haven't stepped in and said like, hey, this is
one plot was 3 hectares. How do you forget about a 3 hectare plot that you own? Although I do have a question, right? So let's say someone's been squatting and has a little one of those little brick huts in the middle of an overgrown field, you see, and now and then in Krakow. How does the city go about kind of ensuring that that person never gets to a stage where they can make a case like that? Like, can they forcefully evict, I suppose is what I'm asking.
Technically, they could. And the fact that if they just tried already, took the legal steps towards evicting somebody or moving them on, that already resets the clock. But unfortunately, it seems
that's where the real fuck up is.
They never even bothered. And after, that's what the whole idea is, that if you don't care about your property and somebody else is looking after it one way or another, then by default, after I don't know how much time it is, the rights to that land is conveyed to that person.
Josh,
there was a case, in which a guy ended up with a plot in Mulnovka Park and then sold it for 2 million zloty.
Jesus Christ!
I mean, this is nuts. Like,
Josh, is this in any way?
Actually, sorry for the dangly comment. We really want to talk to you, Łukasz. Come on.
Yeah, find your balls, as Dave says, and come join us. Josh, is this in any way comparable to the situation in London that we see sometimes in the news, where bands of kind of hippies just take over a mansion that's been abandoned for years, and they get some kind of legal right to stay there. In some cases, they can sell it.
That doesn't happen anymore. I mean, I think that's one of the few things that Tony Blair got right, was that he did kind of rejig.
So it was the case until 20 years ago or so.
I mean, there were some very famous ones of people living in, kind of sort of semi-derelict, massive properties in very, very expensive parts of London, and then, after the elapsing of a certain amount of time, then having kind of the right to live there.
Never understood how somebody could not realize that this massive, valuable property was theirs, or the property of someone they know or in their family. How do you just forget that you own a property?
Well, I mean, most of the vacant super mansions in London are owned by foreign wealth, really, aren't they? That was there was actually, sorry, just to say, I think John's referring to, there was a spike after the last recession in those properties being occupied, and a big movement to put them to use. But I think the billionaire class got the message and put some tenants in them.
Yeah, for sure. So bottom line, Dr. Mike, this cost the city God knows how much money. This
hundreds of millions.
This lack of enforcement, and it's basically a giveaway.
Basically, you just have to be patient enough to spend 20 years on some plot of land. But
well, I mean, I'm sorry, it could be a lot more sinister than that, couldn't it? I mean, we're talking about serious transfers of wealth here. What's to say that some of the, some people in the municipal council were deliberately not filing paperwork that would block these things? I mean, what's to say that there's not a network of corruption going on here?
In Krakow?
No.
It just smells to me. Do you know that? It just smells. 52 cases in 8 years in Nova Huta. The land is very valuable in Nova Huta. That seems crazy to me. Like, it really does.
Let's transition to the presidential election from 2 weeks ago. We all know that Andrzej Duda won by, 2.5 percentage points, I think, which translated into about 500,000 votes. Very close election. Much, much closer than anybody anticipated. So full credit to Rafał Trzaskowski for that. I know you guys talked about it a little bit last week, but I missed last week for reasons that we've already gone over. So I did want to raise a couple of points. First of all, the election is still in the news because the inevitable avalanche of lawsuits has kind of hit the courts, Dr. Mike. People suing for various reasons and insisting that the whole thing be done over or the result be nullified by the courts.
Well, what's going on right now, or what was introduced a few days ago, were the protests against the election. So you could say that, in my local municipality, in my voting booth area, somebody wasn't stamping the papers the right way, so those votes don't count. And in all these situations, it has to be formally investigated and checked and see what happens. Another major problem was in countries out. in other countries where Poles could vote, they weren't getting the leaflets or the information or the voting brochures in time to send it back in time for the vote to count.
Can I just throw this out there really quickly? So I was going to mention this last, but since you brought it up, I'll mention it now. One of my controversial opinions, Dave. Am I the only person who believes that if you're outside of your country, sorry, you just can't vote? If you want to vote, if it's that important to you, stay in the country.
I actually agree. It's just simpler that way. And in Ireland, that's pretty much the case. Famously, when we had the equal rights for the marriage referendum, touchingly, huge thousands of people travelled home to vote. It was one of them real feel-good moment. And when it passed, you had tens of thousands of people dancing in the streets from all over the world.
But to see people insisting that the government bend over backwards to get all the documents they need delivered in time to their remote vacation in rural Antarctica, and if they don't get it, it's some kind of violation of their human rights. That's ridiculous.
What I do is
they're referred to as the South Poles. Is that right?
I register to vote all the time, so I'm always on the register. If I happen to be in Ireland, I would go and vote. It never seems to line up, so I don't really worry about it too much.
Well, on Polish TV, you saw these
because I don't live there.
You saw these clips of lots and lots of Poles at the consulate somewhere in Croatia, in Split, maybe. I forgot exactly where it was. Long past the time when the polls were closed here in Poland, 10 o'clock at night, they're standing in line to vote, and they're complaining that my vote doesn't count, and this is very poorly organized.
Also, wasn't this
sorry, the election, I know we have special circumstances because of the delay and the COVID and everything. Yeah. You want to go on vacation? Great. Okay, that means you can't vote. Sorry, that's just how it is in my book. Maybe I'm wrong.
Look, I would agree to that before the election. I agree with it now. I think you're absolutely right in principle. Certain countries have different cultures, but what I wanted to ask Details McGee over here is wasn't there an expansion of the postal vote specifically because of COVID? Ergo, it was always likely to have a few wrinkles.
Well, in the UK, where they couldn't vote because of social distancing, stuff like that, the Polish government introduced the correspondence voting there, that you get your voting package and then you have to send it back if you were living in the UK. And it seems that a lot of people didn't get that voting package in time, or when they did, it didn't get to the consulate in time. And this happened around the world in a few places.
And another reason we don't do it in Ireland is we've massive expat populations and very fine margin constituencies. So you can sway a race with 1,000 votes easily in some of these.
I mean, for me, the idea of absentee votes should be limited to, say, military abroad, or people who are in companies that force them to work abroad for a period of time. But those would be fractions of a percent, not just somebody who goes on vacation.
Dr. Mike, just quickly on the same subject, what do you make? What's your personal interpretation of the fact that the Polish vote abroad from the UK and Ireland was overwhelmingly for Krakowski, and the Polish vote from North America overwhelmingly for Duda? What's your interpretation of that?
How can you interpret something like that?
I think, first of all,
something's at work there.
First of all, the expats living in Europe tend to be younger and a lot more, say, involved in the culture here in Poland.
Good one, I like that.
While the ones in the US, older, lived there for a long period of time, different culture, they see the old mother country in a different light.
He's trying to say the Fox News crowd.
No, that's another thing that kind of bothers. Not only do I think that you shouldn't be able to vote from outside of the country, I also think, for example, the Poles in America. Sorry, if you've been in Chicago since 1974, maybe you should be concentrating on American politics. And
now you're slightly
going at Chicago. You've got your own shit to worry about.
Exactly. Now you're slightly dialing up the insult level from you shouldn't be allowed vote to stop.
Pick a country. I don't like
being interested in answering polls.
I mean, I haven't voted in Australian politics for years because I don't live there, and I feel like I'm not qualified to.
Good for you,
John. I just realised you're American. I've known you for nearly, I don't know, God knows how long, and you've never talked about your heritage. You're right. This is really strange, actually. What is what blood are you, mongrel? What are you, Scots-Irish? What is that anyway, Scots-Irish?
English.
You're English?
Yeah.
All right, disappointing. What? He's American. I was hoping we could claim him. That's what we do.
So he's English-American.
He's never been to Ireland, right? You've never been to Ireland?
I've been to Ireland.
You've been to Ireland?
Yeah.
Yeah? Many times?
One.
I mean, many times you've been to England?
5 or 6.
You see? You're getting all the tourist dollars, Josh,
Coming back
to
Ireland,
John.
He's been pouring money into the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which I'm very grateful for.
You were at the gourmet cheese bar, John. What's that? Stilton on a APA, was it?
Coming back to the election,
the beer comes up at the bottom.
I want to make the point, Dr.
Bottom
Mike
beer
and
wankers.
Dave, again, we all know Duda won, but I think one of the two reasons that Trzaskowski lost. One, it was a completely idiotic decision to skip that last debate. There's only chance at a one-on-one debate for reasons that I already covered. It was a chance to score a lot of points. I think looking back, he has to be very angry at himself for not accepting that. And let me get this in really quick. Another reason he lost is that there really wasn't a lot of ideological space between the two candidates. This was not a far left versus far right thing. They were very close, right? They were very close on the spectrum. And when that's the situation, I think voters look at it and say, okay, if we're not getting a huge change, why should we vote to change?
No,
so I think that worked against Trzaskowski, that he didn't create more space between himself and
what you're saying is when you strip back all the scenery, that there's a lot of different similarities between some PiS and PO politicians, in terms of their kind of centrist view of the world. I'm sure you're probably right, John. There's a conversation to be had there. But to say that with the viciousness of the left-right divide in Polish politics in the last few years, and to have a representative from each side, Trzaskowski for the left and Duda for the right, that it wasn't a clear choice is madness. The fact that it was such a clear choice is why it was ran close in the end. I think Trzaskowski in the end, I hate to say it, but I don't think he's been on the scene long enough or has a record long enough to be anything other than a kind of symbol candidate at that stage. He did well enough where people projected what they wanted onto him a little bit. Time will tell if he's a long-term good politician for the country, and I hope he is. I hope they finally found a credible challenger, because that's actually what they've been lacking for the last few years.
Let me make one more point. I want to know what you guys think about this. In the aftermath of the election, we all saw those maps showing who voted for whom, East versus West, urban versus rural, higher education versus no higher education, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The usual cliches about two Polands. I got so irritating. And I see a trend. It's kind of coming to resemble what I think is taking over in American politics. I don't think it's a good trend, but this is simply how it is. Because a lot of people are making the argument, like, why doesn't PO focus more on small towns and rural areas? Why doesn't PiS go to the big city and make their case? Winning hearts and minds, right? Whereas the fact is that's usually a waste of time. You're better off going to where your voters are. Go ahead and assume that people have already made their mind up before they hear from you at all. They did, especially in the age of social media. Voters kind of educate themselves. You're not going to convince them with a standard stump speech. So,
that's why.
Let me finish this. If Trzaskowski, he could have gone to, in Podkarpacia, in the Podkarpacia region, he lost like 71-29, like a complete beatdown. So maybe conventional wisdom says, look, PO candidates should go and spend more time in Podkarpacia, winning those hearts and minds. Whereas I think, no, he's better off staying in Warsaw, in Poznan, in Wrocław, in Katowice, in Trójmiasto, talking to the people who already like him and working on turnout. This is all about turnout, getting your supporters to the polls.
Can I agree with you now?
Not about winning hearts and minds.
Can I agree with you now? You're dead right. It's a direct vote for president in Poland. All that matters is turnout and, like you say, giving a simplistic kind of clear vision for the country, much more so than a kind of parliamentary, setup. So I totally agree with your sentiments there, John, for once.
I think the truth is that it's not very nice, but the truth is that PO should say, screw you countryside. PiS should say, screw you cities, and focus on their base.
I disagree on one point.
Voters to the polls.
I disagree on one point. I think PO have a quite a clear, quite a nasty vision that they project. They have a way of foghorning a certain, like, we'll get to the Ikea thing later. I'm dying to talk about that, and it's a classic example of it.
On the list.
It creates a narrative. They're quite good at it, and they're quite disciplined as well. If someone gets in trouble and alters the "we're the party of change" narrative, they drop them like a hot snot. They stamp on corruption scandals quickly. They try and control the news cycle. They're doing a good job. Whatever you think of their vision for Poland, they at least have something that their voters see is a vision. And since Tusk left the scene, I think we've all kind of agreed on this. That's what PO have lacked:
chaotic,
a charismatic character that people can say, you know what, whatever else I might think about the details of his policies, I kind of trust that guy. I want that guy in power. And, I think it's underplayed because we talk about the Dark Lord Kaczynski so much, how credible the guy Morawiecki is.
What do you mean?
He's the Dark Lord. There's two Dark Lords. But,
it's so confusing, all these Dark Lords.
And we rightly focus on them a lot, but I think it's often worth making the point that to an awful lot of centrist polls, Morawiecki makes that stew a lot more edible, doesn't he?
Dr. Mike, what do you make of the reach out to the other side versus concentrate on your existing supporters argument?
I don't think one excludes the other. You can concentrate on your own supporters, but also try to reach out. I think one of the main problems that a lot of the more left-leaning politicians have here, or groups, is that and this is my impression anyway, is they attack not the other side in the sense of politicians, but their voters. Like in Poland, you hear like POS calling PiS voters wieśniacy, as in like, rednecks, simpletons, etc. While I get the impression PiS, when they insult the other side, they're calling them elitists, or they're more laughing at the actual politicians or the celebrities that support them, and less the voter base. I mean, it a little bit spreads onto, this is my general idea, though, is that they try to insult the top more than the base, while PO tends to insult, you look at all the memes online and they're making fun of, this old woman or this stupid drunk redneck, he's probably a PiS voter, which means that PiS voters feel insulted and more likely to band together. That increases turnout, unification, while PO's tactic prevents people switching sides.
Very quickly, last question about the election before we move on to Ikea. Because of the narrow margin involved in the election, do you think either side learned a lesson about what they've done wrong? Is Duda going to be more independent and carve his own path? Is PO going to be less elitist, as you say? Any reformation coming after this?
I doubt they're going to learn their lessons. PiS is going to be more convinced that they have a winning formula, and PO won't realize that they only got this close is because everybody kind of got behind Trzaskowski, not because they have this kind of unifying idea. So during the next parliamentary elections, PiS will still probably be the main winner, or that side of the table will be the main winner.
That would be the 7th victory in a row.
Yeah, exactly. While everything else will be spread around.
I think on stage he was very credible, and he offered a vision that actually forget about all this culture war stuff. I don't care about that. You shouldn't either. And what we saw there within 2 weeks is a lot of the centre in Poland started to consider a left-wing politician purely because the man was credible. That's what the left have been lacking. Grzegorz Schettino has to go down as one of the worst party leaders of a major party in the history of Polish politics. And that's been the issue for PO, and that's what people on the left don't want to talk about because they hate PiS so much. And I think that penny has started to drop now, and I think we're going to see, I hope and I do think and in a healthy kind of way after 2 full terms, I think PiS are going to lose the next election because the next term all of the problems are their own. This is what always happens in parliamentary politics. You can blame the mess you got left behind in your first term to some extent. Your new policies give you a bit of a bounce.
The pendulum swings back
in the second term, the new policies, like the giveaway policies, the bill starts to come in for them. People start to notice that it's getting taken out of the other side of their pockets.
The Polish left isn't going to spend.
I think there's a bomb waiting to go off with civil service pay in this country. I think there's a lot of issues ahead, and that's not to forget the largest global economic crisis we've possibly ever seen around the corner.
Well, full credit to Trzaskowski. I think we're all impressed with how well he did, and I think we're all curious to see what's next for him too.
Yeah, no, he did well. He proved some of my predictions that was a bit of a strange move wrong. I think he's kind of claimed that centre stage now. But he has to build on this. He has to, really, really come out fighting.
Dr. Mike, can he go back to work as the mayor of Warsaw?
Oh, he never stopped working, technically. He was on vacation during those days.
And also, I think, despite my thing, that the people of Warsaw will be kind of going, oh, well done. Yeah, you're back to real. Actually, because he ran it so close, I think he returns a hero, probably. So I was wrong about that as well.
Let's bring things to a close today with news from Ikea. There's a story that made our show and lots of news around the country last year. Dr. Mike, give us the quick version of why it made the news last year and why it's back in the news this week.
Well, last year, an employee of Ikea was fired because on their internal...
And this is here in Krakow, by the way.
In Krakow, yes, the Krakow Ikea. He sent out some biblical quotes in protest to some LGBT articles that were being sent out by the HR department.
And their internal communication.
Yes, and he was fired for that. Now the government... State prosecutors have decided to file charges against the HR director for firing this person on basically saying that this impeded his religious rights.
Foghorn politics, the state prosecutor. I mean, how many times has this happened in history? Here's my thing with this, right? It's the company intranet. It's not his Facebook page. It's not a private chat. He works for a Swedish multinational. He knows LGBT week is a big thing every year. And the comments underneath, all right, they're biblical quotes, but if a man lies with a male as a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. The HR department asked him to remove that because some people had reported being offended by it, and he refused. I can't help but think Thomas wanted to be famous, to be honest with you. I have a very strong indication in my mind that this gentleman would have known exactly the reaction this would have caused. And as a paid employee of a company, if you want to keep your job, you got to play the game a little bit. I'm sorry, they're a Swedish company, not a Polish company. You should really kind of know what their values are before you join.
Well, I don't think any company should have values in that regards whatsoever, political, ideological.
They all do.
So, I mean, that's kind
that's
of
the
annoying.
reality of the world. Mike. They all do. You work for the state in the real world, out in the street. You join a private company.
I
don't
agree
put
with
comments like that on pages.
First of all, this exactly like you said. This was a private internal memo, and this was a reaction to it. You have to also remember
It was a comment on the internet article. He put a comment underneath it.
Yes, but he actually took a personal day off the day before that, not to take part in the LGBT plus campaign they were having
Why
that
didn't
day.
he just not make a comment as well? And then he would have been home free, wouldn't he?
But don't you sometimes have the urge to comment on something on Facebook and you just can't help it?
I would never think of
Especially
posting.
if it insults your, say, political or social or religious belief, something that you hold dear.
I would never walk into work in the morning and think the world has no right to offend poor little Dave. Like, I mean, look, sorry, this is his paid employment. He clearly didn't want this job. I honestly think he engineered this. Do you not see what I'm saying, Mikey? Is unless he's an idiot, he knew where this was going when he did it. Like, and then he was asked. He wasn't fired for it. He was asked to take it down, and he refused. I just think it was grandstanding. You know, I'm talking about the real world. The company
should have just said whatever and ignored it, because it's kind of Barbra Streisand effect right now. But if they hadn't,
they would have ignored it if he'd have taken it down. He would have made his point. Everyone would have seen it, and he would have taken it down because he was told to, and he would have kept his job. I think
they could have taken it down if they wanted to.
He wanted to go to the media. He wanted to make a big song and dance about it. His comments in the interviews are all, I signed a contract to sell furniture, not implement so-called LGBT values or promote ideological propaganda. It sounds like he's singing perfectly off a certain hymn sheet, if you ask me.
I agree with you, Dave. My default assumption is that Ikea almost certainly gave him a way to save face and get, kind of quietly resolve this, keep his job. Everybody can walk away happy. But I think he wanted to make a federal case out of this, as we say.
And I'm definitely sure the government was more than happy to oblige him in that sense.
So what's the next step? Ikea is on trial for violating his rights?
Well, this HR director, because, if you're firing somebody in Poland, you have to have like a legal right to in the sense that it has to be something specific in the contract that was stipulated there. But if you just fire them because, he's claiming, or the government is claiming that it was on his religious views or rights, then they might have a case. I mean, I'm quite interested to see which way this might go.
Yeah, no, I think that this is, from the legal perspective, putting the morality of it to one side, I think that they may very well have a case, actually.
Does this guy want to go back to work at Ikea? This company that so badly offends him?
No, but it's not him wanting to go back to work. It's the government saying, you fired him illegally.
Yeah, but has he moved on, or does he want his old job back?
No information like that was available, but I doubt it.
Why would he want his old job back if it's such a horrible place that oppresses him in this way? I wonder what he wants. Yeah, exactly. Oh, well. That's kind of a weird note to end on, but that's where we are going to end. Don't forget to go to our website, KrakCast.pl.
We're not going to talk about the EU?
All of our... Oh, what?
Next week, with the budget? That's a big discussion, in fairness.
Big discussion.
Yeah.
It's also another kind of thing that makes people say, wait a second.
Oh, my God.
No, it is interesting, but it's just not a showstopper.
Okay.
Okay? Can we do...
Yeah, okay, we'll do it next week.
Can we do EP budget next week?
Get more of the
repercussions. And Kurski taking just swanning in and taking TVP over again. We'll do that next week as well.
Anything else you want to do next week, Dave?
No.
No? Okay. If that's the final word, then we will bring things to a close. Thanks for listening, everybody. Dave has another final word. Dave.
What's the gator on your shirt? I've been trying to figure it out. I can't associate it with any...
Gators, University of Florida.
University of Florida, okay. Yeah. Is that your alma mater?
No.
It's very snappy.
It's a nice t-shirt.